3 days before the election, the law has been amended. Well, imagine you're playing a soccer game or a football game, and right on the intermission, the rules have changed, and you're kind of wondering what's going to happen, why, and so on and so forth. Basically, the main thing was that the law required a quorum of 2/3 of members of election commissions to be present in order for votes to take place that would bind their decisions. That provision was eliminated, so now you did not require a quorum. Whoever showed up is fine, and then the majority could hold secret meetings with the rest not being there, and those decisions will be binding. Naturally, immediately there was a call to the European community to do something about it, and the European community reacted, I may say, immediately, basically asking the president not to sign that into law, but veto it. Well, the way things developed, the president, in the shortest time ever during the 5 years that he has been president, signed the law. Basically, when the observers, international observers were in Ukraine, they were focusing just on the fact whether the election commissions will have a quorum, will have a majority in there to adopt decision. That was the main concern of international observers in talking to them. That's my personal experience. The other thing that you find out, and I'm talking from the legal point of view, and as a judge, a great concern of mine, the law also, one of the problem areas was the vote at home. The people that were asked, that were requesting to vote at home. The law provides that you may vote at home if there are certain categories classes of disabled individuals. I believe 1 and 2, you don't need any medical certificates. For others, you would need a medical certificate to vote at home. But that again became very controversial because the courts have made a decision, or the administrative court had made a decision that you need a medical certificate. However, the CEC, the Central Election Commission, in its directives to the voters said you don't need one. So again, it was something that was up in the air. By the way, the judicial system, all those that are talking about reforms, judicial reform should be a priority, because without a judicial reform in Ukraine, you cannot have the applicability of the rule of law. And no matter what you do, it's not going to work. That would be my suggestion to those that really are talking about reforming Ukraine today, tomorrow, or in the next year. Then, concerning the vote at home, again, it became very controversial because the law requires that 3 members of the election commission should take the mobile box to the house where an individual is voting to observe what is happening. Well, the Central Election Commission gave a direction or instructions really that 2 would be enough. So you had again a situation where the courts were deciding one way and the CEC was deciding the other way. However, the Court of Appeals made that decision that 3 members were required pursuant to the law. By the day after the elections, the higher administrative court said 2 members was enough. So again, you have before the elections the court deciding one thing, and then after the elections the court deciding something else. And let me just say one more thing about the courts. You know, the highest court that decides election matters is the higher administrative court. However, there is a big question. Is there a chief judge in the on the higher administrative court? The term has expired for the present chief judge, and there is a question whether he can stay there and be an active chief judge or someone else. So some judges elected someone else, and pursuant to the press conference by the chief judge of the Supreme Court, while others said, no, the one that is there right now, Judge Pasanyuk, should remain there. So you have this controversy, who really is running that court? And the role of a chief judge in Ukraine is extremely important. In the United States, the chief judge basically just coordinates the activities and nothing else. While in Ukraine, he disposes of everything. He signs cases and other things. So there's you have. Now, were there violations? I would say yes, they were. Were there violations to the extent that would overcome the results of the elections? That is questionable. You cannot say at this point. If Mr. Yanukovych won by 700,000 votes or 900,000 votes, you would have to overcome that. You have to prove that the fraud was perpetrated for more than 900,000 voters. So by more than 900,000 voters. Whether this process of appeal that the Prime Minister has suggested will take place will prove that is questionable. But under the law, this is something that is permissible. In the country rule of law, this is fine. Now, very briefly, what things that were happening. Still, you had the merry-go-round voting, people voting in a number of polling stations. People that were not assigned, that have not lived in the premises for 10, 15 years, were still voting at the same premises. Hospitals, like in Luhansk and in Zakarpattia, when you have, let's say, 200 patients at the hospital and you have 500 voting, so that is something that is a little bit problematic. Rather than having passports, they had copies of passports, especially in Uzhhorod and Zakarpattia. Now, what actually contributed to the victory or the alleged victory of Mr. Yanukovych at during this election? I think the main concern or the main reason for that is the voters that stayed home and voters that voted against all candidates. You had a turnout. First of all, in Western Oblast, the turnout was lower than in previous times, except for Ternopil, I believe. Again, people stayed home, and those that voted voted against both candidates. The percentage was 4.5. So it was a large percentage, considering that Mr. Yanukovych won by 3.5. I was at a polling station where President Yushchenko was voting, and he said, it is very shameful that we have this selection, but it is democracy. And he walked away. He didn't say another word. And then I was at a polling station where former President Kuchma was voting, and they asked him a question about what the President Yushchenko has said. And without blinking, President Kuchma said, well, if I would get 5% of the vote for president, it would be a shame for myself also. So that was a good answer, I thought. The alleged victory of Mr. Yanukovych is contributed to the work, saying, and policies, especially in the last few days, of President Yushchenko.